spoke up when my father-in-law decided to stop paying for my sister-in-law's wedding after she accused me of baby trapping her brother. Now his family blames me for causing drama. I, 24F, had my surprise pregnancy celebration last weekend at our apartment. We deliberately kept the gathering small and intimate, just my boyfriend Nate, 25, our immediate families, and a handful of our closest friends. Nate and I have been dating for almost 3 years now, having met during our final year at university through mutual friends. 4 months ago, I made the significant decision to move in with him after discovering I was pregnant with our first child. I was honestly terrified at first when I saw those 2 pink lines on the test. We're both relatively young, still in the early stages of building our professional careers, and hadn't previously experienced living together under the same roof. Additionally, our respective families had only met on a few occasions and barely knew each other beyond surface-level pleasantries. But despite all these potential complications, we both genuinely wanted this baby and felt a connection to the life growing inside me, so we mutually decided to make this new arrangement work regardless of the challenges ahead. After several long conversations about our future, we agreed we would get formally engaged soon and then marry properly after the baby arrives and things settle down into a new normal. My family was completely supportive from the very start of our announcement, offering assistance and expressing genuine excitement about becoming grandparents and aunts and uncles. However, Nate's older sister Vanessa, 29, and his mother Caroline underwent what could only be described as a complete personality transformation toward me immediately after Nate officially announced the pregnancy and our future plans to both families. Before this revelation, they had always presented themselves as friendly, welcoming, and seemingly approving of our relationship whenever we interacted at family gatherings or holidays. Afterward, their demeanor transformed dramatically into something cold, noticeably distant, and increasingly passive-aggressive with each encounter, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere whenever we were in the same room together. Several days after the announcement, Nate later confided in me that they had confronted him privately about the entire situation when I wasn't present. Despite them explicitly swearing him to absolute secrecy and making him promise not to reveal their conversation to me under any circumstances, he felt compelled to tell me everything they had said behind closed doors. Their numerous objections ultimately boiled down to 2 primary issues that they couldn't seem to move past. First, Vanessa was already in the process of getting married to her boyfriend of 5 years in just 3 months' time, and she adamantly felt that our pregnancy news was deliberately stealing attention and focus from her important moment in the spotlight that she had been planning for over a year. Second, and significantly more insulting to my character and integrity, they openly suspected that I had deliberately and calculatingly gotten pregnant as part of some master scheme to permanently secure my place in their family, specifically because of their comfortable financial status and standing in the community. To provide some necessary context regarding our respective financial backgrounds, Nate's family is undeniably comfortable financially and has been established in the community for generations. His father Richard owns and operates a highly successful regional construction company that employs over 50 people and handles major commercial and residential projects throughout the state. Caroline, meanwhile, manages their extensive real estate investment portfolio consisting of multiple rental properties and commercial buildings across several neighboring counties. They live in a spacious house in an exclusive neighborhood with all the amenities that come with financial success accumulated over decades of hard work and smart investments. In contrast, my parents both work respectable but modest positions in healthcare administration at the same regional medical center. We're solidly middle class but certainly not wealthy by any reasonable standard. We've always lived comfortably enough, but without the luxuries and financial security that Nate's family enjoys as a matter of course. Given this disparity, their accusation that I had deliberately engineered this pregnancy as some calculated social climbing strategy to improve my economic situation was not just offensive but deeply, personally hurtful on multiple levels. It completely discounted the genuine feelings Nate and I had developed for each other over 3 years together. Thankfully, Nate didn't believe or entertain any of these insulting insinuations for even a moment and immediately told me everything so I wouldn't be unexpectedly blindsided by their increasingly cold behavior without understanding the root cause behind it. Despite the hurt caused by these accusations, we ultimately didn't cut contact completely with Vanessa and Caroline because Richard specifically and repeatedly asked everyone involved to maintain the peace for the sake of family harmony. The family had several significant life events approaching on the calendar, including Vanessa's planned wedding in just 3 months and eventually our own ceremony sometime after the baby's arrival, and Richard expressly wanted to avoid any public displays of family discord or dramatic confrontations that might overshadow these important occasions. Since Richard had consistently defended me from the very beginning of this uncomfortable situation and shown genuine kindness toward me when others in his family had not, we reluctantly agreed to remain outwardly civil with Caroline and Vanessa primarily out of respect for him and his wishes, rather than any desire to maintain relationships with them. As my pregnancy progressed and became increasingly visible, Richard thoughtfully suggested that Nate and I should consider getting formally engaged somewhat sooner than we had initially planned. His reasoning centered around the fact that I was noticeably starting to show, and he believed an official engagement would present a more favorable impression to their extended family members, business associates, and broader social circle who might otherwise gossip or make judgments about our situation. We were genuinely comfortable with that recommendation anyway, as it aligned with our existing intentions, so we proceeded with the engagement and arranged a modest celebration afterward to mark the occasion with close friends and family. However, rather than improving the situation, Vanessa and Caroline appeared substantially more upset and agitated following our engagement announcement, making increasingly frequent and pointedly unsubtle remarks within earshot about how our timing was uncomfortably and suspiciously close to Vanessa's planned wedding celebration, as though we were deliberately attempting to overshadow her special day. I genuinely struggled to comprehend the basis of their persistent concern regarding our timeline. We had repeatedly clarified on multiple occasions during family gatherings that we absolutely wouldn't consider getting married until well after the baby was born, and we had adjusted to parenthood, and even following that, we would realistically need several additional months to properly plan a wedding ceremony that would satisfy both families. By any reasonable calculation, our eventual wedding would likely occur at minimum 10 to 12 months after Vanessa's celebration, making any competition for attention completely irrelevant given the substantial separation in time between the two events. The tension finally exploded into open conflict during my pregnancy celebration last weekend. Without any warning or preceding conversation, Vanessa deliberately approached me while I was speaking with some friends and pointedly asked to examine my engagement ring up close. When I innocently extended my hand to show her the ring Nate had selected, she loudly commented within hearing distance of several nearby guests about how expensive the diamond and setting must have been, drawing unwanted attention to our interaction. She then proceeded to make what she later claimed was merely a joke, that even if Nate ultimately decided against marrying me after the baby arrived, my child and I could certainly pawn the ring and live quite comfortably for quite a while on the proceeds. Before anyone could respond to this inappropriate comment, she further added with a thin smile that I should make sure to keep it safe in a secure location in case my obvious plan to baby trap her brother doesn't ultimately work out as intended. Every single person standing within proximity clearly heard her deliberately loud comments as the room momentarily fell uncomfortably silent. She delivered these highly inappropriate remarks with a smile plastered across her face and followed them with a forced laugh, but tellingly, only Caroline joined in with her own unconvincing chuckle while everyone else remained awkwardly silent or looked away in embarrassment. I stood there completely speechless, unable to formulate any kind of response to such an unexpected and public attack on my character and intentions. Nate immediately started confronting his sister with visible anger building in his expression, but before he could fully articulate his outrage, Richard intervened first, his face flushed with embarrassment as he sternly demanded that Vanessa apologize immediately for her inexcusable behavior toward a pregnant woman at her own celebration. When Vanessa stubbornly refused his direct request, repeatedly insisting with defensiveness that it was just a harmless joke that everyone was overreacting to, Richard made an announcement that clearly surprised everyone present. If she was so deeply concerned about potential gold diggers infiltrating their family, then perhaps she should demonstrate her financial independence by paying for her own elaborate wedding entirely, because he personally wouldn't contribute another single cent toward the considerable expenses she had planned. That particularly tense moment is when I finally managed to find my voice after the initial shock had somewhat subsided and said, with more confidence than I actually felt, that I genuinely thought Richard's suggestion was an excellent and appropriate idea given the circumstances and Vanessa's expressed concerns about financial motivations. Without hesitation, Richard immediately confirmed his decision on the spot to completely withdraw all financial support previously promised for Vanessa's upcoming wedding. Absolute chaos instantly followed this declaration. Shouting erupted from multiple directions, tears started flowing, accusations began flying indiscriminately across the room from various family members. My increasingly uncomfortable friends quickly made excuses and left the hostile environment, leaving only our respective immediate families remaining in the apartment. The heated argument continued unabated for what subjectively felt like endless hours of circular accusations. My visibly upset parents, increasingly protective Nate, resolute Richard, and my overwhelmed self positioned firmly on one side of the living room, while Vanessa and defensive Caroline remained stubbornly entrenched on the opposite side, neither willing to acknowledge any wrongdoing whatsoever. Eventually, as the argument showed no signs of reaching any productive resolution and my stress levels continued escalating dangerously, I firmly told Vanessa and Caroline they needed to leave immediately because I was becoming excessively upset by the continuing conflict, which medical professionals had specifically warned me was potentially harmful for the developing baby. After they finally stormed out with additional muttered comments under their breath, Richard conscientiously stayed behind to offer a sincere apology for the entire uncomfortable situation and explicitly told me that I absolutely no longer needed to maintain any sort of polite facade or pretense with them moving forward. He emphasized that he completely understood if I wanted nothing whatsoever to do with either of them following this unfortunate incident. I graciously accepted his heartfelt apology, recognizing that beneath his initially strict insistence on maintaining family harmony, he was fundamentally just an old-school, traditional family man genuinely trying his best to hold his increasingly fractured family together against progressively impossible odds and circumstances beyond his control. In the tense days following this unfortunate confrontation, Nate and I have deliberately stopped all direct communication with members of his immediate family with the exception of Richard, who continues to check in on us periodically with genuine concern. Despite our clear boundary setting, Vanessa and Caroline have been relentlessly bombarding Nate's phone with numerous accusatory text messages and voicemails at all hours, dramatically claiming that I have single-handedly completely destroyed everything within their previously harmonious family dynamic. Their messages repeatedly emphasize how they supposedly don't know how they'll possibly afford the elaborate wedding arrangements at this late stage, that Richard has stopped speaking entirely to Caroline despite their decades-long marriage, and somehow, inexplicably, I personally need to fix everything that has gone wrong, as though the entire situation stems from my actions rather than Vanessa's inappropriate public behavior. Nate is increasingly and visibly stressed by this continuous onslaught of guilt-inducing communication despite repeatedly insisting to me that he genuinely wants absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with their unnecessary dramatic behavior and manipulative tactics. I cannot help but feel at least partially responsible for the escalation because I did openly encourage Richard's spontaneous decision to withdraw the previously promised wedding funding, which undeniably escalated the already tense situation to an entirely different level of family conflict. So considering all these complicated circumstances, Ida for vocally supporting my future father-in-law's impulsive decision to completely stop paying for my sister-in-law's planned wedding? Edit, to thoroughly clarify exactly how the wedding finances were originally supposed to function, since numerous people in the comments have been asking about the specific arrangements and expressing confusion about the financial implications of Richard's decision. Both Nate and Vanessa have had separate wedding funds gradually established by their parents over many years, intended to help cover their eventual marriage celebrations. For Vanessa's wedding ceremony and reception scheduled for 3 months from now, she and her fiancé Alex's family had already covered the substantial deposits and various required advance payments to secure venues, catering services, floral arrangements, photography packages, and other essential wedding elements. According to the family's established financial arrangement that had been agreed upon months ago, Richard was planning to handle all the remaining considerable expenses associated with the celebration and additionally write Vanessa a comprehensive check shortly after the wedding ceremony to fully reimburse everything that she had already personally spent from her savings to secure these services. That particular arrangement had been specifically designed to simplify the potentially complicated process of managing wedding finances across multiple parties and ensure Vanessa wouldn't need to deplete her personal savings for an extended period. But now, given the current circumstances and Richard's firm decision, since all the elaborate arrangements have already been formally established with vendors through mostly non-refundable deposits and contractual obligations, Vanessa realistically cannot back out of any of these financial commitments without losing significant amounts of money that has already changed hands. If Richard maintains his position and doesn't reimburse her as originally planned, she'll be completely stuck paying for everything herself without the financial safety net she had been counting on throughout the entire planning process. Her fiancé Alex and his extended family unfortunately find themselves in a surprisingly similar financial situation to mine, generally comfortable in their day-to-day lives but certainly not wealthy enough to comfortably afford the extraordinarily extravagant wedding celebration that Vanessa had enthusiastically planned under the assumption of her father's financial backing. Consequently, they now find themselves in genuinely serious financial trouble with the wedding date rapidly approaching and numerous financial obligations that cannot be easily cancelled or modified without substantial penalties. Update 1. After reading through countless comments and reflecting deeply on the situation, I finally gathered the courage to have a genuine heart-to-heart conversation with Nate about everything he's been silently going through during this family conflict. I approached the discussion carefully, asking if he harbored any feelings of resentment or disappointment toward me specifically, since I undeniably did play a significant role in escalating this complicated family mess by openly supporting Richard's financial decision. He immediately and emphatically assured me that while he's understandably distressed about the overall deteriorating family situation and ongoing tension, I'm absolutely the last person he would ever consider blaming for any of it. He stated, looking directly into my eyes, that he's actually quite proud that I finally found the strength to stand up for myself after months of silently enduring subtle insults and passive-aggressive behavior from his mother and sister. During our lengthy conversation, He thoughtfully pointed out that my seemingly impulsive comment supporting Richard's financial decision wasn't remotely unfair or unreasonable under the circumstances, especially considering the broader context of how Vanessa and Caroline had consistently and repeatedly implied through numerous subtle comments over recent months that I was nothing more than a calculating gold digger deliberately trying to trap him into a permanent relationship through pregnancy. He expressed with genuine emotion that he simply cannot imagine how extraordinarily difficult and emotionally draining these past several months must have been for me on a daily basis, constantly pretending everything was perfectly fine during family gatherings while simultaneously knowing exactly what they truly thought about my character and intentions behind my back. He acknowledged that while they had at least previously maintained enough basic decorum to keep their deeply offensive opinions relatively private rather than confronting me directly to my face, Vanessa's public so-called joke delivered deliberately at my own pregnancy celebration had clearly crossed an unacceptable line of basic human decency, and he was genuinely relieved and glad that I had finally summoned the courage to say something in response rather than continuing to silently absorb their increasingly obvious hostility and disrespect. As our conversation continued well into the evening, Nate carefully explained that his increasingly visible stress primarily stems from his growing realization that Vanessa and Caroline almost certainly won't simply let this significant conflict naturally resolve itself or fade away with time as he had initially hoped might happen. He revealed that in the early stages of this family tension, he had privately maintained some hope that we might all eventually reconcile through open communication and mutual understanding, but based on their recent escalating behavior and increasingly hostile messages, that positive outcome now seems increasingly unlikely with each passing day. What's genuinely bothering him on a profound emotional level, he confessed quietly, is the increasingly distressing prospect that this painful family rift will remain unresolved and possibly even worsen by the time our innocent baby arrives in just a few months. As he explained his perspective with increasing emotional vulnerability, I found myself completely understanding and empathizing with his complicated feelings about the situation. I reflected honestly that I would undoubtedly feel exactly the same conflicted way if members of my own family were behaving so irrationally and creating such unnecessary drama during what should be a joyful time of celebration and preparation. Until this crucial conversation, I had been conscientiously giving him considerable emotional space and distance, genuinely believing that solitude and time for independent reflection was precisely what he needed to process everything that had transpired between his family members. However, after hearing the depth of his emotional struggle during our extended heart-to-heart discussion, I instinctively reached out and hugged him tightly without saying anything further, which unexpectedly became the emotional catalyst that caused him to break down completely in a way I had never witnessed from him before throughout our entire relationship. Over the next hour, he vulnerably poured out his deeply conflicted feelings with remarkable honesty, expressing how emotionally torn and divided he feels because despite their inexcusable behavior and hurtful actions, they fundamentally remain his mother and sister, his core family who had been present throughout his entire life before I entered the picture. He expressed with genuine sincerity that he genuinely wants them to be actively present in our child's life and development, creating those special family bonds and memories that he treasures from his own childhood. But simultaneously he firmly insists they must sincerely apologize to me directly and make genuine efforts to repair the damage their actions have caused before any reconciliation can possibly occur. The fundamental problem complicating any potential resolution is that Vanessa and Caroline remain absolutely convinced against all evidence and reason that this entire unfortunate situation is exclusively my fault and responsibility. According to their distorted perspective that Nate has gathered from their numerous text messages, they firmly believe that Richard would have only temporarily threatened to withdraw the substantial wedding funding as a momentary disciplinary bluff designed to make Vanessa apologize in the moment, but never would have actually followed through with implementing such a consequential financial decision without my specific verbal encouragement that allegedly pushed him beyond his original intentions. During our conversation, I logically asked Nate the question that many outside observers would naturally wonder: why couldn't Vanessa and Caroline simply adjust their expectations and pay for the upcoming wedding themselves given their respective financial resources, considering that Vanessa undeniably has a well-compensated professional position with considerable discretionary income, and Caroline actively manages their family's substantial and reportedly profitable real estate investment portfolio that generates significant passive income. His response revealed the true complexity underneath the surface conflict. He carefully explained that at this point, it has fundamentally evolved beyond a simple financial matter into primarily an ego issue and power struggle for them both. They adamantly insist that Richard should fulfill his financial obligation precisely because he had explicitly promised he would contribute substantially to the wedding expenses many months ago during the initial planning stages, and they simply cannot psychologically accept or process that he's unexpectedly breaking that significant promise specifically because of me and my perceived negative influence over his decision-making process. Despite their relentless communication attempts, Nate has deliberately chosen not to respond to any of their increasingly desperate and accusatory messages flooding his phone, maintaining a firm boundary that he established immediately following the incident. However, his silence has not discouraged them whatsoever, as they persistently continue trying various manipulative tactics designed to make him experience intensifying feelings of guilt and familial responsibility for their current predicament. They repeatedly and forcefully insist through multiple daily messages that I personally should somehow magically fix the deteriorating situation between all parties involved, apparently expecting me to convince Richard to reverse his financial decision despite the circumstances, even though everyone directly involved in the situation, including Richard himself, clearly recognizes that they're unquestionably the individuals who should be sincerely apologizing to me for their inappropriate public behavior rather than continuing to deflect responsibility. The continually escalating tension surrounding this family conflict has unfortunately been consuming Nate's mental and emotional energy almost entirely during what should be a joyful time of preparation for our baby's arrival, making it increasingly difficult for him to properly focus on anything else important in his professional or personal life, including preparations for the significant life changes approaching with parenthood. Update 2. It's been about 10 days since the celebration disaster. This morning, I unexpectedly heard from Caroline and Vanessa after their extended silent treatment. I hadn't blocked them because I wanted to leave open the possibility of an apology, however unlikely that seemed. When Caroline called this morning, I answered immediately but set immediate boundaries. I told her up front that if she was calling to argue or convince me I was wrong, she should hang up right now because I wasn't interested. I'd only continue the conversation if she was calling to apologize. When she stayed on the line, I let her speak. Caroline and Vanessa, apparently on speakerphone together, proceeded to apologize for their behavior. They admitted they'd been petty and inappropriate, especially given my advanced pregnancy when they should have been reducing my stress, not increasing it. They acknowledged hurting not just me but also Nate and Richard, which was never their intention. They said the family breakdown was entirely their fault, despite initially trying to blame me. They explained they'd spent days trying to justify their behavior and pin responsibility on me, but eventually had to face the truth: they were in the wrong. Their pride had prevented them from apologizing sooner because they didn't think I deserved it, but they'd finally reached a point where they felt ashamed of their actions. They asked if I would consider forgiving them and joining them, along with Nate and Richard, for dinner to resolve our misunderstandings. I was caught off guard and didn't have an immediate answer. I told them I needed time to think. Their behavior had hurt not just me but also Nate and Richard deeply, and I couldn't speak for anyone but myself. I explained that if I wasn't pregnant, this might be simpler, but my priority right now is avoiding emotional distress. Our last interaction had been incredibly draining, and I'm not eager to risk a repeat experience. I needed time to decide whether I want them in my life and if forgiveness is possible. I also clarified that I couldn't promise resolving things with me would fix their relationships with Nate and Richard, nor could I commit to a dinner gathering yet. They were silent for a moment before saying they understood my position. While disappointed I couldn't immediately forgive them, they asked if I would at least tell Nate they had apologized. They explained that after ignoring their messages, he had finally blocked them entirely, and they felt terrible about everything. Even if I couldn't forgive them yet, they would consider it a huge favor if I could help them reconnect with Nate. I was unsure how to respond because while I knew Nate wanted reconciliation, his decision to block them likely had good reasons behind it. I told them I would let him know about their apology, but whether he unblocked them would be entirely his decision. I wouldn't involve myself further. They seemed disappointed but grateful that I would at least pass along the message. Before ending the call, they apologized specifically for suggesting I was only with Nate for financial gain. They acknowledged that my actions proved I cared about him more than anyone, perhaps even more than they did. Otherwise, they said, I wouldn't have even taken their call or considered helping them despite everything. I simply confirmed they were right about that. The one thing we all had in common was loving Nate and wanting his happiness. After that, we ended the call. Update 3. It's been a few days since that phone call. I told Nate about his mother and sister's apology but made it clear the decision to reconnect with them was entirely his. I mentioned their request but assured him there was no pressure either way. He told me he still needs time to process his feelings and isn't ready to make a decision yet. For now, all he wants is peace and quality time with me and our soon-to-arrive baby. His routine is simple these days: work, then home to me. Since I'm on maternity leave, I'm home most of the time. I've been using this time to create a happy, calm environment for us, cooking his favorite meals and making our home comfortable. The sweetest part is that he comes home with little surprises he knows I'll like, without me asking. And whenever he's home, he talks to our baby through my belly, which melts my heart every time. These past few days have been wonderfully peaceful. We haven't discussed family drama at all. Richard checks in occasionally, But that's our only contact with his side of the family. Today, though, Nate asked if I'd be comfortable with him speaking to Caroline and Vanessa again. I told him I'd fully support that decision because I know reconciliation is important to him. As we prepare to begin this new chapter of our lives in just a few weeks, letting go of past hurt seems like the healthiest choice. If he's ready to forgive his mother and sister, I'm on board. We decided to call Richard first for his perspective. He'd already cautiously resumed communication with Caroline and Vanessa a few days ago, not because everything was resolved, but because sharing a house with your wife without speaking becomes unsustainable after a while. Things between them were civil but definitely not back to normal. The same applied to his interactions with Vanessa, who had been visiting frequently. Richard enthusiastically supported the idea of a family dinner, believing it would help resolve the lingering awkwardness. With his blessing, we called Caroline and proposed dinner this weekend. She immediately agreed and conferenced in Vanessa, who was equally eager. So this weekend, we'll all have dinner together and hopefully begin healing these family wounds. I know some might disagree with my decision to give them another chance, but I believe in second chances. Everyone, including myself, has needed forgiveness at some point. With our baby arriving soon, starting this new chapter with peace rather than ongoing conflict feels right. I've discussed this with my parents, who agree I'm making the right choice. I don't feel the need to defend my decision, but I want to acknowledge up front that negative comments about reconciliation reflect more on the commenter than on me. This makes Nate happy, and I'm hopeful that by the time our baby arrives, we might actually feel like a normal, functional family again. Update 4, I apologize for disappearing for so long without updating. It's been several weeks, and I completely forgot to post here. So much has happened since my last update, starting with that dinner. The dinner went surprisingly well, better than I had dared to hope. Caroline and Vanessa offered sincere, heartfelt apologies right away, expressing genuine shame over their behavior, which they admitted was tacky and completely unwarranted given how I'd always treated them with respect. Their sincerity caught me off guard, and I initially remained cautious. But in the weeks following the dinner, they demonstrated real change, visiting regularly, offering help with baby preparations, and consistently showing they wanted to repair our relationship. After witnessing this sustained effort, I gradually opened my heart to forgiveness. Then last week, I went into labor with both our families present for support. When our daughter finally arrived, the joy in the room was huge, perhaps the purest happiness our families had shared in months. Since then, life with Nate and our daughter has been beautiful. My parents, Richard and Caroline, and even Vanessa and her fiancé have been incredibly supportive, sending gifts and offering help so Nate and I can focus entirely on the baby. That's my life now, completely consumed with our newborn in the best possible way. I'm grateful everything worked out and that our daughter will grow up surrounded by family who love her. My little one is getting fussy, so I need to go, but I wanted to share that sometimes, with patience and forgiveness, even the most broken family situations can heal.